Now, what are the objectives of this session? The session is designed to help the research scholars in learning how to identify research gaps using papers published in high-ranked journals. Store necessary information for writing an introduction. Now, the first thing that one should do is, before taking on the journey of writing a paper, is that identification of research gaps. Now, if you fail to identify research gaps properly from existing literature, what you end up with is a research that is not worth it. No journal, no quality journal would publish your research. So the first step is identification of research gaps. How do we go on and identify the research gaps? You search through latest research in Emerald, Sage, Springer, Science Direct, Wiley, Taylor and Francis, and JSTOR. If you are conducting business research, these are the top ranked journals. Databases that have got top-ranked peer-reviewed journals. You identify the explicit gaps. For starters, if you have recently starting research, this is a good point to start. You read existing papers, latest research, and identify what those researchers have done and what have they identified as a limitation for future research. Moving on, you can identify implicit research gaps, something that is not explicitly available in the limitations and future research directions of the paper. For instance, you've been going through some literature on servant leadership, and you come to know that there is hardly any research on servant leadership in public sector organizations. So this is something that you stumbled upon after reading a lot of papers, something that you observed in existing research. You have to document your gaps, limitations in existing research. This is very important because this will guide your research introduction. You have to identify the limitations of existing research. You have to note the future research directions. Now, how do you document the literature review? Documenting your search can help. Keep track of what you have done so that you don't repeat unproductive searches. Reuse successful search strategies for future papers. You know how to search, because while you are searching, this will help you, this will guide you, and you will know that this is how we should search the literature. Describe your search process for manuscript. If you are writing a systematic literature review, this is particularly important. How did you search the papers for your systematic literature review? Justify your search process. This is again increasingly important. Why a particular searching style? What strings did you use? And how did they help you in your search process? Now, eventually build a critical literature review. Once you have stored and documented the information, the literature that you come across, the literature that you read, you can easily build a critical literature review. Now document the details. A research paper one reads has several points that can be documented. However, anything that is documented must be in line with the research being carried out. You have to have focused documentation of whatever you are reading. Following details are recommended to be documented as they can help in writing the introduction of a paper. So when you are planning to write the introduction of a research paper, what information should you store? You should store the title, the area, the value of the study, value in the area, existing research that is available, gaps, limitations in existing research addressed. So what gaps and limitations did that particular paper address, so that you are not repeating what has already been done? What theory did they utilize? What are the contributions of the paper? And what limitations did that particular study identify? Now, in order to do this, what you can do is you can use this Excel sheet. Now, in order to do this, you can use this Excel sheet. This Excel sheet will help you store relevant information about the papers that you are reading. As identified, you should store the title, the area, the value of that particular concept that you intend to study, why that particular area, the concept is important in a particular area, maybe hospitality, maybe public sector organizations, maybe fast moving consumer goods, maybe any other study setting. So what existing research is available in that particular area? And I think this is gaps and limitations in that particular study. The theory that that particular paper has used, what are the contributions that particular paper has made, and what are the limitations that have been identified by that particular paper. Now once you've got all this information, you can easily draft your own introduction. Now before going into detail as to the examples of each of this particular documentation, the first thing, actually I took the liberty to create an example. How do we get on and how do we draft a research model? How do we get to a research model when we don't have one? But what we know is that we want to focus on a particular concept. For instance, I want to focus on servant leadership. Now, what I did was I only used one database, Emerald. Now, using Emerald, what I did was I found a paper, and this is the paper that I found. The impact of servant leadership and transformational leadership on learning organization, a comparative analysis. The paper was accepted in January 2020, so it's a very latest paper. Now, while I was reading through the paper, my intention is to propose a new model. Now, I came across this paper and I found it pretty interesting. And I thought that, okay, let's focus on this model, modify this model, improve this model, and we can obviously produce our own model that we can use for a study. Now, in this model, or in this study, what they have done is they have taken servant leadership and transformational leadership and assessed its impact on learning organization. Now, if we go into the limitations and future research directions of this paper, what we can come across is despite the contributions of this study, its limitations must be acknowledged to help future researchers improve their studies on leadership styles and learning organization. First, the study is cross-sectional. Now, it is important to mention here that what are potent gaps, something that one should focus on, something that can be published. One thing that is important is that you should add new concepts in your model, new constructs in your model. You should add new variables in your model. Without new variables, your research might not be strong enough. You can't say that this study was conducted in America and I'm conducting this study in Pakistan or India or Australia or England or Saudi Arabia or any other country. So you need to have new variables in the model, new relationships that have not been checked before, or particularly with these variables. Now, if I come to the limitations and future research directions of this paper, what I see is that they have recommended organizational culture as a moderating variable between leadership and learning organization. So what I should do is, or what I can do is, I can go to Microsoft Word and store this information because I'm going to use it in future for my study. So as soon as it opens, we are going to start. So we are focused on servant leadership and its impact on learning organization. This study has recommended organizational culture as a moderator. Now, what we could simply do is, let's say, we can make a model out of this. Servant leadership, and this influences learning organization. And we can take a moderator, organizational culture. Now obviously what you have done is you have taken a gap from existing research, and this is a strong gap because you have added a new variable into the relationship. But what if somewhere in the world someone else has also read the same paper? What if somewhere in the world someone is also conducting the same research study, and he or she manages to publish this study sooner than you could complete? Now what will happen is that your whole effort will go down the drain. So it's strongly recommended that we take gaps from multiple sources. So we took gap from one paper, this paper. Now what I did was I searched some more, and while I was searching I came across another paper, and here is this paper. So while I was searching I came across this paper, another latest paper published in 2019. And while I was looking at their limitations and future research directions, I found out that they have recommended that this research actually focused on only one mediator, career satisfaction. However, other variables such as self-efficacy, promotion focus, career commitment, empowerment at work, work-life balance, work-life enrichment, job stress, and employee well-being also have the ability to explain the relationship between the two variables. So this research is actually recommending some other variables that could be influenced by servant leadership. For instance, career commitment. I see that this variable can work in this model, because not only that servant leadership could influence career commitment, organizational learning can also influence career commitment. So what I do is I add career commitment here. And just an arrow. Now I've taken gaps from two papers. Now this looks a more complex model than the earlier one, and obviously I can further link servant leadership with career commitment as recommended in the other paper. So learning organization now is a mediator between servant leadership and career commitment. So an improved level of servant leadership in any organization would lead to organizational learning or learning organization. Obviously the two concepts do have their differences, but a number of scholars have said that both mean the same thing. And if there is a learning organization, obviously this will improve my commitment or career related commitment to the organization. And organizational culture could moderate the relationship between servant leadership and learning organization. Now what I've done is I've just used two existing studies to build onto and develop my own model. I could further complicate this model. How can I do that? Let's see. Okay, I've already used this. Now there is this paper and there is this paper. While I was searching through the internet, I came across this paper, a very interesting paper. Review of empirical research on leadership and organizational learning. So an SLR on organizational learning and leadership. So what existing research has been done on leadership and organizational learning? And the interesting fact is it's recently published in May 2020. And whatever has been done in existing research is actually presented in a form of table along with a diagram, a model. So we can easily identify variables from this model and see if they have been evaluated or assessed with respect to servant leadership. If not, obviously we can take those variables and make them part of our model. For instance, let's say I take on organizational innovation, and because I checked the internet, the databases, I couldn't find any study, maybe. So I could add organizational innovation in my model. Or what I can do is, I've got another paper here. Yes, this paper. Look at the model of this paper. This is very interesting actually. They looked at the direct relationship of organizational learning on, where is the model? Let's go to the proposed model. Yeah. So they looked at the impact of organizational learning capacity on relationship specific innovation. Now, what have they recommended for future? What they've recommended is that in addition, this study exposes a supplier's learning capacity in two areas, ALC at the firm level and JLC at the relationship level. Future studies could add several other drivers to study the innovative outcomes. So there could be other factors that could influence innovative outcomes of the global supply chain more comprehensively, along with both types of learning capacity. The relative influences of diverse factors on innovation may elicit very dynamic insights. So what are they recommending? They are recommended that you can take market orientation as a variable that could be influenced by organizational learning. So let's take this. Let's put organizational learning in. Sorry, market orientation. And market orientation has been taken as a outcome variable in number of studies. So this is a particularly important variable. So what we do is we put this one here, just rearrange our model a bit, and let's say we put this here, and let's say we put this here. Now, based on at least 4 papers, you have drafted a completely new model which actually originally looked like this. Yes, like this, with no mediators, no moderator, a simple model. And what you have done is, after reading 3 or 4 latest papers, what you have done is you have proposed a very complex model like this. Now, I'm sure that obviously if somebody wants to use it, you are free to use this model. I'll send these papers along as well if you want to further modify the model, so you can have those papers and further modify the model as well. So now this is how you can use existing research to propose your model. Now I did this like in the morning in say 30 to 40 minutes. It might take you even less than that. So using several of these papers that are available in the literature, what you can do is you can propose your own complex models and get them published. I hope this would have helped you understand how to use existing research and propose your own model. Coming back to our webinar, now this is how you use existing research to propose your own model. So just a quick recap. This is what we had, and while reading just 3 or 4 papers, this is what we got. 3 or 4 latest papers that identified, okay, these are the relationships that can be evaluated in future research. Using those papers, we actually presented or got this model. Now, how do you write or start writing the introduction of the paper? Now, before you put yourself into the writing chair, you need to store relevant information. Read and store relevant information. In this case, let's take an example of a paper. Now, for example, let's say we've got this paper. Development and validation of servant leadership scale in Spanish higher education. Whenever you are going through a paper, most of the papers have got and journals have got a fixed format. You start with an abstract, Obviously, the abstract published in Emerald is slightly different to abstracts published in other databases. So let's say this is our paper, and what information do we need? We need the title of the paper. So let's copy the title of the paper. Second is, what area did they focus on? And in this case, it's pretty clear from the title that it was higher education. If it's not clear, what you need to do is you can look into the design and methodology. And if it's not in there, it will definitely be in the methodology section where they would have mentioned, okay, this was from where they collected the data. Or they would have mentioned in introduction if they are focusing on a particular area and taking that particular area as a gap of research. So in this case, it's higher education. I'll share the Excel sheet on the link, and then you can obviously download. Now this is where the story starts. Value. Value means why studying this particular concept is important. And where is this value in a research paper? It's always in the introduction. So if you see that more or less, what my experience is, and that it is more or less in the first two paragraphs. 95% of the times I've come across that it is always in the first paragraph. What's the importance of the particular area that you are focusing on? In this case, we are focusing on servant leadership. So why is this particular area important? Servant leadership is a holistic leadership approach focusing on follower development in ethical, rational, emotional, relational, and spiritual dimensions. The objective is to bring out the best in the employees. For this reason, servant leadership has got an increased prominence in both theory and practice. This is because servant leadership goes beyond self-interest. Well, according to Van Dorendonk, there are other leadership styles as well, but their focus is on achieving organizational objectives. Their focus is not on going beyond self-interest. Servant leadership, obviously, the objective is to the ultimate intention is to achieve the organizational objectives, but through going beyond self-interest, through focusing on the employees, through emotionally connecting with the employees, through developing a relational approach. So this is the value of this particular concept. So what I do is I just simply copy this and put it into my Excel sheet here in the value. Here it is. Just wrap the text. Now, if your paper is focused on a particular area, if the paper that you are reading is focused on a particular area, let's say in this case the paper is focused on higher education. So why is this concept important in higher education? Obviously, this will be followed by the value of the topic in general. In this case, it says that research on servant leadership has primarily focused on business organizations, with relatively scarce research in context of higher education. Higher education institutions are faced with increased complexity, scarcity of resources, and fierce competition for ranking and prestige. And this is the reason that leadership is important. Leadership in the educational institutions is massively challenging as leaders are faced with tough decisions pertinent to budgetary cuts, freezing pay raises, or program elimination. So what you can do is just simply copy this text and put it into your Excel sheet. There you go. Wrap the text. Now, what existing research is available in this particular area? And obviously we can easily copy this from this. This paper was actually focused on scale development. So actually what we did was we started with identifying the limitations with respect to scale development. So although several scales are available to measure certain, much of the existing research has focused on generic development and validation. We do not need to copy everything from this paper. What we do is we can just copy this particular text, put it in here. Obviously, this is not the only limitation that this paper addressed. There are other limitations as well. And if you read through this paper, what we come across is that this this paragraph, obviously you will, this is my paper so I know where the things are, but whenever you are doing your research you have to read the paper, maybe introduction 3 or 4 times in order to identify where the actual information is. So in this case, this is the limitations of existing research, just pertinent to servant leadership. But this paper has got other variables in as well, so there are other limitations as well that you need to copy and put it. Let's say this. Obviously you can just like increase the size of the cell so that every information fits in. So this is existing research. Now if I go down the paper, there is existing research on career and life satisfaction as well, because these are the mediator and the outcome variable in the study respectively. So what are the limitations pertinent to these variables? When you read through this, you can easily identify and copy it in your Excel sheet. What gaps and limitations did they address? Obviously, while you are reading the existing research available, most of the times researchers have mentioned that these are the gaps that they are going to fill. So in this case, let's read through this. Existing research has called for further research into both career and life satisfaction. Despite the progress in the career satisfaction literature, the research is significantly limited and requires further exploration. Now, this is the limitation of existing research. Career satisfaction could serve as a useful mediating role. So this is the gap that they have addressed. I've told you and mentioned before that these two things can go side by side. So what you can do is you can copy this text here, because this is one of the gap that they addressed, and just paste it here. So while you read through your introduction, this is how you can copy and paste the information. The next step is theory, as one of the student or the participant rather asked. What theory? So where is the theory? If you go down, once they have identified the limitations and gaps in the existing research, once they start writing about the contribution, sometimes it's before the contribution and sometimes it's within the contribution. If we search through this paper, we'll find that here is the theory that they have used. They have used LMX theory pertinent to servant leadership, career satisfaction and life satisfaction. So what you can do is you can write LMX theory. Now here you mention the contributions that are made by this research. Now doing this is particularly important, that as you read you will identify that this is how these things should be written. As one of the participants asked, how do we go about in writing it? So what you can do is just copy and paste, or you can shorten it if you want, or just copy and paste the whole text, because obviously you are going to read it later. So these are the contributions. And finally, what limitations did they identify? Because obviously we are going to use the limitations from existing research to write our own introduction. So what you can do is just go to the end and identify the limitations of this research. Okay, do not copy the whole paragraph. Look into the limitations that you think that you can work on or you will work on. For instance, in this case, let's say we are interested in adding new variables, or let's say this thing, because they also recommended taking other leadership style as well and evaluating their impact on career satisfaction and life satisfaction, or doing a comparative study. So this is one paper done. Now similarly, what you can do is you can go on to the next paper. This paper, copy and paste the information from this paper, copy and paste the information from this, and so on and so forth. Once you have got 15, 20, 30 papers, read through this Excel sheet. Once you read through this Excel sheet, you will personally be able to identify how I should write the value of a particular area. And once you write this, obviously the concepts will be flowing from this Excel sheet. And you can use this Excel sheet for reference as well. So this is particularly important. You can start, for example, let's say, once you have filled in the Excel sheet and you find that, okay, I've been reading through this, I've read this Excel sheet, and